Green Nation, what's up? Today the atmosphere is electric. Ever since this matchup came into our sights, it became clear that something bigger was at stake. Not just the magnitude of the stage, but everything that's been building up inside this offense that, even with all its tools, still hasn't shown what it should. When you dig deeper, when you look closely at the details, you realize there's a story being written beneath all the noise, and it needs to be told. So come on in, hit that like button to support the channel if you've been a Birds fan for over 70 years. And if you can, drop this in the comments. Go Eagles, I believe. What makes this even stranger is that the defense right now is trending like one of the best units in the NFL, maybe number one, maybe number two. That should make life easier for the offense, not harder. Yet the offense sits middle of the pack or worse in nearly every category that matters. 16th in scoring, 25th in yards per game, 29th on third down. Even with the number one red zone offense in the league, the overall performance is inconsistent enough that it has kept the Eagles in unnecessary dogfights and forced the defense to carry way too much weight. The maddening part isn't lack of talent, it's lack of rhythm, lack of identity, and, most concerning, lack of creativity. When you zoom in further, the numbers reveal something even more concerning. The rushing attack, powered by Saquon Barkley and an offensive line that should be capable of dictating games, is averaging just 3.9 yards per carry, 25th in the league. Saquon's yards before contact have dropped by more than a full yard, a 40% decrease from last season. And anyone watching knows that's not because he suddenly forgot how to run. It's because the moment he gets the ball, defenders are already collapsing the lane. The injuries haven't helped either. Cam Jurgens barely returned before getting hurt again. Lane Johnson, out 4 to 6 weeks. And the group has barely played a complete game together. You can't build continuity when you can't even keep the same 5 guys on the field. Then there's the passing game, a strange combination of efficiency scattered across certain metrics and complete stagnation in others. Jalen Hurts, statistically, is having a good season. Top 10 in passer rating categories. Number 1 in completion percentage under pressure. 5th in deep ball completion rate. Those aren't numbers from a quarterback who's dragging an offense down. But none of that matters when the overall production sits at 184 passing yards per game, 28th in the league, and when the offense throws the ball the second least of any team. The lack of continuity in play callers over the last decade hasn't helped Hurts, and while he deserves part of the blame, missed throws against Detroit, hesitations, moments of conservatism, he's far from the central issue. Because when you look at receiver separation, 1.91 yards on average, 25th in the NFL, it becomes clear that the passing issues run deeper. Routes aren't diverse, matchups aren't being manipulated, and the biggest stars on this roster simply aren't being schemed open. A.J. Brown's route chart from the Lions game is almost shocking in its lack of variety. 11 targets, 7 catches, 49 yards, and almost every route clustered near the sideline. No movement to the slot, no windbreakers, no creativity. You're essentially removing the entire middle of the field from your offense, and in the modern NFL, that's giving the defense a cheat code. And when you compare that to his charts from 2024, the difference is night and day. Crossers, digs, posts, slot fades, everything that uses his physicality and yards after catch ability. This year, those concepts rarely show up. It's the same story for DeVonta Smith. When he exploded for 183 yards against Minnesota, he lined up everywhere, inside, outside, left, right, and ran a wide range of routes. But in other games this season, the chart becomes simplified, stale, predictable. It's not that these players suddenly lost talent, it's that the design around them shrank. And in the NFL, if the play caller isn't scheming windows and creating conflict, even elite receivers become easy to defend. This brings everything to one central point, one that the file makes clearer than anything else. The biggest issue with this Eagles offense is not just execution. It is predictability. It is lack of creativity. It is an offensive structure that has shrunk instead of evolved. Kevin Patullo has to be better. The play sequencing has to improve. Motion needs to be used more. The middle of the field needs to be attacked again. The receivers need route variety. And the offensive line has to find stability long enough to give this system a chance to breathe. And that leads to the question that feels impossible to avoid as we prepare for Sunday in Dallas. With all this talent, all this potential, and all this urgency, can this offense finally break out of its shell, or will predictability keep holding them back? What do you think is the biggest reason behind the Eagles' offensive struggles this season? Picking up right where we left off, the deeper you dig into this offense, the more you realize that the issues aren't isolated, they connect to one another like a chain dragging the entire unit down. Predictability affects separation. Separation affects timing. Timing affects protection. Protection affects confidence. And all of it together affects the rhythm of a team that used to slice defenses apart with explosive plays and relentless pressure. What this season has exposed is that when even one link in that chain weakens, the whole system can start to feel tight, hesitant, and disconnected. And that's exactly what we're seeing on film. Think back to the early part of last season when defenses feared the Eagles' ability to stretch the field both vertically and horizontally. The offense manipulated leverage, alignment, and speed, and they attacked the middle of the field with purpose. Crossers, digs, RPO slants, these weren't occasional wrinkles. They were foundational concepts that created consistent mismatches. This year, those concepts appear less frequently. Instead, routes often stack on top of each other, spacing collapses, and defenders can squeeze throwing lanes because they know what's coming. You can almost see defenses playing faster, more confidently, because the offense has become easier to map. And that affects someone like A.J. Brown more than most. He's a power forward in shoulder pads, elite strength, elite yards after catch, elite ability to post up defenders in traffic. But to unlock that, he needs movement. He needs to be motioned into stack looks. He needs to be placed in the slot. He needs those layered middle-of-the-field concepts that force defenses to cover him from uncomfortable angles. Without that, he becomes a stationary target constantly fighting press coverage with no leverage advantage. That's not using your star, that's isolating him. And then there's DeVonta Smith, who might be the cleanest route runner in the NFC. He's capable of winning anywhere on the field because his releases, footwork, and timing are special. But if the offense reduces him to basic sideline outs, curls, and simple fades, you take away what makes him special. You turn a multidimensional weapon into a limited one. And when both of your elite receivers are being restricted by design instead of unlocked by it, your offense becomes a shell of what it could be. It circles back to Kevin Patullo. The play calling doesn't just need to be more aggressive. It needs to be more intelligent, more layered, more intentional. Pre-snap motion needs to be more than window dressing. Tempo needs to be used as a weapon, not a panic button. Route concepts need to create traffic, leverage, and space. Right now, too many plays are asking the players to win purely with talent instead of giving them the structure to win even when talent meets a talented defense. The offensive line, despite the injuries, is still capable of playing at a high level. They've been inconsistent, yes, but not broken. What they need is rhythm, because no offensive line thrives in a system that feels disjointed. Saquon Barkley has shown flashes of explosion all year, despite limited room to work with, and he's proven he can still be the kind of back who changes games. But even the best backs in the league need design space, angles, and light boxes created by smarter passing threats. Without that, even he looks human. And that's why the timing of this matchup with Dallas is so fascinating. The Cowboys' defense is vulnerable, very vulnerable, in ways that the numbers can't hide. They've given up chunk plays. They've been blown off the ball. They've looked lost against offenses that show movement, variety, and deception. If there was ever a moment for the Eagles' offense to make a statement, to recalibrate its identity, and to finally break some of these patterns, it's right now, in a game that could swing the entire NFC East. But the lingering question is whether this staff is willing to evolve quickly enough to match the moment, whether the players are ready to play with the urgency that Dallas week demands, whether the offense that once terrified the league can wake up before it's too late. What becomes impossible to ignore as you follow this storyline to its core is that the Eagles are standing at a crossroads. Not a meltdown, not a crisis, but a moment where the offense must decide what it wants to be. Because right now, the defense is playing at a championship level, the roster is stacked with blue-chip talent, and the NFC is wide open for a team with the right combination of discipline and explosiveness. And yet, the offense keeps drifting in and out of games like a unit searching for itself instead of asserting itself. When you watch the tape, the most frustrating part is that the solutions aren't complicated. They aren't theoretical. They aren't out of reach. They're right there. Target the middle of the field. Increase motion. Vary alignments. Run crossers. Force defenses to communicate. Push the tempo. Call plays with layered purpose. Every elite offense in the NFL does these things automatically because those concepts produce open receivers even when the talent gap is small. This year, the Eagles have too often done the opposite, relying on their stars to win static matchups, expecting precision timing on routes that don't naturally create separation, and trusting execution over design in situations where design should make execution easier. And when a team becomes too rigid, even the best players can look frustrated. You see it in A.J. A.J. Brown's body language when he runs another route pressed against the sideline with no leverage advantage. You see it in DeVonta Smith's routes that end 3 yards short of the sticks because the concept never stressed the defender. You see it in Hurts' hesitation when he scans left and finds 2 receivers operating in the same vertical space, giving the defense no conflict. That isn't a quarterback issue. That isn't a receiver issue. That is a structural issue. The other layer to all this is urgency, because you can feel it, a pressure that grows with each game where the offense doesn't click. Fans feel it, analysts feel it, players feel it, and now they're walking into Dallas week, wearing Kelly green on the road for the first time in decades, facing a Cowboys team that's been loud, confident, and convinced that this is their chance to strike. If there was ever a week to throw the playbook out the window and reinvent yourself with aggression, unpredictability, and creativity, it's this one. But here's the part that should give fans real hope. Every issue we've talked about is fixable now. Not in the offseason. Not after a rebuild. Right now, Jalen Hurts is still playing high-level football. Saquon Barkley still looks explosive when he actually has space. A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith are still one of the best receiving duos in the league. The offensive line, even banged up, is still better than most. And the defense is giving this team every opportunity to win games, dominate games, and steal games even when the offense sputters. This is why the responsibility falls so heavily on Kevin Patullo and the offensive brain trust. Because the question isn't whether the talent is there. It is. The question is whether the coaching staff can finally match the creativity, adaptability, and intelligence shown by the league's best play designers. Whether they can build a plan that doesn't just rely on the players being stars, but actually helps them operate like stars. And that's what makes Sunday feel like more than just another chapter in the rivalry. This isn't just Eagles versus Cowboys. This is the moment where we find out whether this offense is ready to evolve, ready to adapt, and ready to step into the identity that everyone expected back in training camp. This is where we discover whether the offense has another gear, or whether the struggles we've seen are a preview of a larger problem. So here's the real question for all of you watching. With everything we've broken down, the patterns, the film, the talent, the coaching, do you believe this offense will finally flip the switch in Dallas and look like the unit we all know it can be? And when you look at everything that has built up to this moment, it feels like the Eagles' offense isn't just being challenged by Dallas, it's being challenged by its own standard. Because this team has shown us before what it looks like when the offense is firing on all cylinders. We've seen the tempo, the layered concepts, the creative sequencing, the mismatches generated pre-snap, the constant pressure placed on defenses who didn't know whether to load the box or defend the deep ball. That version of the Eagles didn't react to defenses, it dictated terms to them. And that's what feels so different right now. This offense is letting defenses define the game instead of forcing them to chase. When you watch the Cowboys' defense on film, you see vulnerabilities that the Eagles should be feasting on. You see linebackers who struggle with eye discipline. You see safeties who bite on motion but panic when offenses attack the middle of the field. You see corners who win with aggression but can be punished by well-designed route stacks and misdirection. This isn't a defense that thrives when the offense is unpredictable. This is a defense that thrives when the opponent is stagnant, static, and predictable, exactly the kind of tendencies the Eagles have fallen into during their worst stretches of the season. And that's why this matchup carries so much weight beyond the standings. Because if the offense walks into Dallas with the same predictable structure, with the same narrow route concepts, with the same lack of spacing and creativity, the Cowboys' defense will sit on everything. They'll jump routes. They'll load the edges. They'll trust their pass rush to win because the timing of the Eagles' offense has been inconsistent. But if the Eagles come out with motion, inside-breaking concepts, tempo, diversified alignments, and a willingness to attack the field from sideline to sideline, Dallas won't be able to keep up. They don't have the discipline for it. They don't have the coverage depth for it. And they don't have the structure to survive it long enough for their offense to bail them out. The key now is whether Philadelphia understands that this is the turning point, the moment where the offense must decide that the season's identity begins here. The defense has done its part. The roster is healthy enough. The stars are on the field. The stakes are exactly where they should be. And the opponent is the perfect measuring stick for what this offense is capable of becoming again. Because make no mistake, if the Eagles' offense shows up and plays to its potential, if the creativity finally matches the talent, if the coaching finally matches the moment, this team can walk out of Dallas not just with a win, but with a new trajectory, the kind that changes the feel of an entire season. This game can be the moment where everything snaps back into place. Or it can be the moment where the questions grow louder, the frustration grows heavier, and the window starts to feel smaller. And that's why, going into this rivalry showdown, the offense has to decide what story it wants to tell. Not just to the fans, not just to the league, but to itself. Because if there was ever a night to reclaim their identity, this is it. And when you zoom out and look at everything we've broken down, the most revealing part is how a team with this much firepower has allowed its offensive identity to narrow instead of expand. What we're watching right now isn't a lack of effort or preparation, it's a system that has become too static for the kind of talent it's supposed to elevate. The file laid out the patterns clearly, route concepts shrinking, spacing collapsing, creativity thinning out, and play sequencing losing the edge it once had. What used to be a multidimensional attack has slowly become a linear one, and defenses in today's league thrive when they can predict where the ball is going before the snap. The deeper you analyze it, the more obvious it becomes that the solution isn't dramatic. It doesn't require reinventing the roster or overhauling the scheme mid-season. It requires rediscovering what already worked. A.J. Brown dominating with crossers and in-breaking routes. DeVonta Smith shifting alignments pre-snap to force favorable matchups. Jalen Hurts operating in a rhythm where the first read is schemed open and the second read has built-in leverage. Saquon Barkley running behind blocking angles that get him to the line of scrimmage without immediate contact. All of this already existed within the identity of this team, it just hasn't been consistently applied this season. And that's where this coaching staff must show its growth, because talent alone won't fix the issues. Hurts can't throw guys open if the route combinations don't create windows. A.J. Brown can't bully defenders if he's running isolated sideline fades 25 times a game. Saquon can't flip the field if every carry begins with defenders in his lap. Even the best players in the NFL depend on a structure that maximizes what they do best. Right now, the structure is making everything harder than it needs to be. And this is why the timing of this discovery matters so much. The stretch ahead, Dallas, the playoff race, the fight for seeding, is the period where great teams sharpen their edges. The Eagles don't need to become a different offense. They need to become a smarter, freer, more dynamic version of the one they already built. The version that uses motion to force defensive communication. The version that spreads the field horizontally before attacking vertically. The version that stresses every blade of grass and forces a defense to defend every inch. Dallas is the perfect test for this shift. Their defense thrives when opponents fall into predictable habits. They feed on shallow concepts, stagnant alignments, and timing routes thrown against tight press coverage. But when offenses introduce misdirection, complexity, and spacing, Dallas gets exposed. You saw it in games where teams attacked their linebackers, manipulated their safeties, and punished their aggression. The Eagles have the personnel to do that better than almost anyone, but only if they're willing to break out of the limitations we've seen the last several weeks. This is the moment to reintroduce motion. This is the moment to reestablish the middle of the field. This is the moment to stretch the defense horizontally and vertically until their structure cracks. And this is the moment to remind the entire league why this offense was once considered one of the most complete, dangerous, and explosive groups in football. Because if the Eagles unlock even half of what this roster is capable of, everything changes. Game flow changes, momentum changes, defensive confidence changes, and the entire tone of the season shifts from frustration to anticipation. And now, with the rivalry on deck and the stakes higher than ever, we're about to find out whether this offense is ready to reclaim its identity, or whether the inconsistencies will continue to drag them through the most important stretch of the year. And what makes this continuation of the story so critical is that we're now entering the stretch of the season where every flaw gets magnified, every tendency gets exposed, and every team either tightens its identity or watches it crumble under pressure. For the Eagles, the margin for error is shrinking fast, not because the roster isn't talented, not because the quarterback isn't performing, but because the offense has spent too much time operating in a conservative shell that doesn't match the ability on the field. When you break down the trends shown in the file, you can see the same theme repeating over and over again. The offense is capable, but not demanding. Hurts is efficient, but not fully unleashed. A.J. Brown is involved, but not creatively deployed. DeVonta Smith is productive, but not consistently featured in ways that maximize his strengths. And Saquon Barkley, despite flashes of explosiveness, is constantly asked to generate something out of nothing because the blocking and the scheme aren't putting him in advantageous situations often enough. That's where the frustration comes in. This offense should be the type that forces defenses into mistakes, that dictates matchups, that creates chaos for secondaries that can't communicate fast enough to handle the movement. Instead, too often, They've allowed defenses to sit in comfortable looks, jump predictable routes, and compress the field because the Eagles aren't stretching it with the kind of variation that once made them nearly impossible to defend. The positive side of all of this is that nothing here is unfixable. Nothing requires an offseason overhaul or a dramatic change in personnel. Everything the offense needs is already built into the DNA of this team. It just needs to be reactivated. The route variety that once helped A.J. Brown dominate with in-breaking routes and deep crossers. The alignment flexibility that allowed DeVonta Smith to exploit matchups inside and outside. The tempo that gave Hurts immediate clarity and put defenders on their heels. The play sequencing that layered concepts together instead of isolating them. These aren't inventions. They're adjustments. And the file makes it clear that the core issue isn't talent, it's usage. And now, with Dallas ahead, this becomes the perfect moment to reset all of it. Because if you can't unveil a more dynamic version of your offense in a rivalry game that impacts the entire NFC playoff picture, when will you? If you can't break tendencies now, you risk carrying them into the postseason where every opponent will study them, target them, and weaponize them against you. This week is more than a matchup. It's an opportunity to force a turning point, to shift from cautious to creative, to reintroduce unpredictability, to take advantage of the weaknesses the Cowboys' defense has shown all season when they're forced to defend wide formations, quick motions, and layered route concepts. This game can be the moment where the Eagles' offense says enough is enough and finally unleashes what this roster is built to do. Because once this offense catches fire, everything else opens up. Longer drives, more rest for the defense, more control of the game script, and more pressure on every opponent waiting down the schedule. And that's why this continuation of the season story matters so much. The Eagles aren't trying to become something new, they're trying to become themselves again. And as this storyline pushes forward, something becomes even clearer. The Eagles are no longer dealing with a simple mid-season slump, they're confronting a philosophical fork in the road. The contrast between what this offense is and what it should be has never been sharper. The file makes it obvious that every piece of the puzzle is already here. Elite receiver talent, a quarterback playing efficient football, a running back who still looks explosive, and an offensive line that, despite injuries, is far from the bottom of the league. Yet the production doesn't reflect any of that, and the reason is that the scheme has compressed itself into something far too small for the roster it's supposed to empower. And that's where the conversation turns from analysis to accountability. Not the kind of finger-pointing that divides a locker room, but the kind of structural honesty that great teams face head-on. When you study the numbers in the file, EPA, separation, yards before contact, route charts, third down percentages, you're not looking at a broken offense. You're looking at an underutilized one. You're looking at a system that is capable of much more but hasn't been willing to push beyond its comfort zone. And comfort zones don't win rivalry games. They don't